For more on this, I want to bring in Mark Simakovsky from Washington. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is an extremely aggressive move from Moscow. The State Department says it's uncalled for. How will these cuts in diplomatic staff impact U.S. operations in Russia?
There'll be a significant impact, particularly at a time of tense U.S.-Russian relations. You want a full staff in Moscow and the consulates to deal with that risk, and as a result, this will significantly undermine U.S. ability to engage on U.S.-Russian relations, to report back to Washington, as well as to help improve, Russian citizens' access to the United States. It's a significant move, absolutely.
The U.S. and Russia, they do coordinate military operations in the fight against ISIS in Syria. So when it comes to ceasefires, let's say, how could diplomatic tensions spill over onto the battlefield?
Diplomatic tensions in the relationship obviously impact the ability for the U.S. and Russia to coordinate and deconflict. There's a ceasefire that was announced recently in Germany between Presidents Trump and President Putin. Our ability to actually implement that is impacted by the tenor and tone of U.S.-Russian relations. If the tenor and tone is deteriorating, which it is now, I think it'll be difficult for those military staffs to coordinate and deconflict, and the commitment of both sides to that agreement will be undermined as a result. I think both sides, though, despite the sanctions bill and the retaliatory Russian response to cut diplomatic staff, at the executive level, I think President Trump is still committed to improving U.S.-Russian ties, and President Putin, despite the 755 expulsion, is also still trying to ensure that he can maintain a semblance of positive U.S.-Russian relations.
But Mark, are sanctions enough when it comes to the U.S. punishing Russia for hacking the U.S. election and invading Crimea?
No, I don't think maintaining the sanctions regime, which is really what this legislation is about, and ensuring it isn't rolled back, is enough. I think the U.S. has to take action to continue to deter and contain increased Russian aggression. I think we need to step back and look at whether or not cooperation in Syria really serves U.S. interests. And I think in particular, like Vice President Pence is doing in Eastern Europe, we need to go to these countries that are under threat from Russian aggression, see what they need, and assist them. And that includes in particular in Ukraine, which is a U.S. partner and which we're trying to resolve, having to help them enhance their stability and security.
So going forward, what does this latest order from Putin mean for the U.S. and Russia's future and improving relations?
I mean, Putin has unsheathed his diplomatic sword. This is not something that's a surprise. The Russians were waiting on finding out if there was a way to improve U.S.-Russian ties. To them, the sanctions legislation is a signal that in the interim, in the short term, it's going to be unlikely. So they had to respond reciprocally to the steps that the Obama administration took to kick out Russian diplomats. This is their response. It could have been more drastic and it could have been tougher, but I still think this is a pretty significant step that's going to complicate improving U.S.-Russian relations, and the Russians essentially are acknowledging it.
All right. Mark Simakovsky from the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, thank you.
Thanks for having me.